How much is an Arabian horse? Hello and welcome to Exploding Helicopter, the podcast that's desperately in need of a rescue mission. Now, there have been many great actor-director collaborations. De Niro and Scorsese, James Stewart and Alfred Hitchcock, John Wayne and John Ford. And there have been many less celebrated cinematic pairings. See anything made by Nick Love and starring Danny Dyer. Falling somewhere in the middle is the creative partnership between Mark Wahlberg and Peter Berg. They've now produced 4 films together, including Deepwater Horizon, Mile 22 and Patriots Day, with a 5th, Wonderland, due later this year. However, on this show, we're going back to the beginning and their first movie teaming, 2013's Lone Survivor. And talking of couplings between middling movie talents, I'm joined once again by my cinematic Siamese twin. With me on this show is my good friend Dara. How you doing, buddy?
Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. I'm glad that you can make a rare appearance on the Exploding Helicopter podcast because some listeners may be wondering where you've been recently. Do you want to take a moment to explain to them why I had to send you round? Why I had to send you to the cinematic subs bench?
I've just got other things to do, Will. More interesting things. And frankly, I can only face doing this podcast once in a blue moon.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's quite as simple as that because, you've been rather tardy. I mean, I get messages from you going, "Oh, can't find the film. We're going to have to cancel the recording."
I will literally make up any excuse. I've manufactured an illness this week. This cough, I actually inhaled some noxious substances to try and see if I would be sick enough not to do the podcast. But unfortunately, it didn't quite work. I'm only mildly ill, enough to strap on a pair of Sennheisers and get on with it, really. But I'll have to do harder next time to make myself sick.
Yeah, well, I'm going to always get my pound of flesh out of you, Dara, so it doesn't really matter what excuses you make. But
let's get on with it, come on.
Well, seeing as we're talking about actor-director combos, I wondered if there were any of those types of collaborations out there that you might enjoy. Now, I could probably guess what your answer might be, which is probably none, but I thought I'd ask the question anyway.
What? Which director would I like to work with, or which actor would I like to work with?
Actually, you know what? That is a much more interesting question. What director would you like to work with, Dara?
Oh, maybe Paul Verhoeven. I like his mix of bare breasts, of dystopian future, and
social satire.
Social satire, exactly. He's kind of unparalleled his enjoyment we got from his films in the 80s. He kind of has fallen down a bit. He's kind of left what was good about his directorial career.
You think?
Well, what's he done lately?
Well, he did a very good film which is called Black Book, set during the Second World War, about the Dutch resistance. And he did a film which I know you've seen, but I don't think you particularly like it, called Elle.
Oh, that was the one with the was that the one where Joaquin Phoenix is talking to a iPod? Or is it something else?
No,
that's she, isn't it? That's she.
That's she.
Yeah,
Elle is it's set in France. It's got I've forgotten the French actress's name, but she gets horribly raped at the beginning of the movie, and she is then stalked by the person who committed this crime, and then the story sort of gets twisted and messed up in a typical. You have seen it, Dara, because I had to really. You slammed it. You were very dismissive of that particular film, and
I'm sure I was right.
I had to bite my tongue at the obvious ways that you had completely overlooked the film's merits and strengths.
I find my memory as I get older for films is getting worse and worse, which makes it really good because I can watch a film one week and then almost forget it completely, and about 2 weeks later and enjoy it again. I'm like a doddery old pensioner now. Terrible.
Well, I just wish that you would forget how much you didn't enjoy taking part in this podcast, because then it would be much easier to get you back on.
Well, it's like pregnancy for women. You kind of they forget how bad it is, and 2 weeks later they think, oh, well, that might be a good idea to that podcast with Will. It wasn't that bad last time. So I don't know. Early onset on Alzheimer's. I don't know what's going on, Will.
Okay, well, I think this is very possibly the worst pre-show amble that we've ever done. I may edit this entire section out, but
edit it all out.
let's get this show on track. So I think it's time to get stuck into Lone Survivor. So let's listen to a frankly underwhelming clip from the trailer.
Listen up, Red Wings a go. Bad guy, senior Taliban commander.
Shaw killed 20 Marines last week. 20.
Going in with a 4-man team. Axelson, myself, Dietz, Marcus. TV. That's a lot more than 10 guys. That's an army. This op is compromised.
This is Spartan 01. Radio check.
Danny, you radio working? The way I see it, we got 2 options. 1, we let them go, roll the dice.
Second that they run down there, we got 200 on our backs.
2, we terminate the compromise.
We cannot do that.
I don't care. I care about you. I care about you. I care about you. Not killing kids, not feeling it.
This is not a vote. We're gonna cut them loose, and we're going home.
Roger that, sir. Roger.
Lone Survivor came out in 2013. It's the true story of American soldier Marcus Luttrell, who was serving in Afghanistan at the beginning of the early 2000s. He and his team are sent out on a mission to capture or kill a Taliban leader called Ahmed Shah. The mission quickly goes foobar, and the team end up having to fight for their lives as they try to escape from their situation. The film was directed by Peter Berg, who, as we've already mentioned, has collaborated several times with Mark Wahlberg previously. In the cast are Taylor Kitsch, Emile Hirsch, Ben Foster and Eric Bana. Lone Survivor was generally positively reviewed, although there was some criticisms or more critical reviews of this movie, which we may get into later. But Dara, what did you make of Lone Survivor?
As a whole, I actually quite enjoyed the film. For action fans, it is a fabulous watch because the set pieces, there's one extended sort of action sequence in towards the middle of the film when things do start to go really wrong for the group who are kind of out on a limb in Afghanistan with no support. They're in the mountains and there's no communication, so they can't get back up, and they've got all these Taliban fighters sort of pinning them down on this mountainside. It is one of the best sort of action sequences I've seen in a long time. You really feel you're a part of, the gruesome game of war. Mortars are going off left, right, and centre. People are getting shot. You really get a feel of the kind of the real tough work that they have to do in these circumstances. And it's a real kind of visceral joy. However, this film is let down by it is a bit one-dimensional. Its characterizations is sort of lacking, and it is a bit of a heavy-handed jingoism and American patriotism starts to wear a bit thin towards the end.
I think you're potentially being a bit generous towards this film. I'm not even sure it is one-dimensional. It may just be completely no-dimensionals. But I do agree with you that there is some really impressive filmmaking within this particular film. And I kind of think of it a bit like a sandwich, whereby you have an absolutely fantastic, really tasty filling, but either side of that you've got 2 very underwhelming slices of bread.
2 soggy bits of bread.
2 soggy bits of bread on either side of that really very delicious filling. But exactly like you said, I think the centerpiece of this film is the extended action sequence that takes place there, and that is totally gripping. It's absolutely riveting. But as much as you can enjoy that, and as much as that should be given credit, there are some sort of nagging flaws in this movie, and I did think ultimately, what did I really learn from this movie? I'm not really sure there are any great takeaways other than
war is hard. War is nasty business.
You'd certainly
real people. I suppose you forget that when wars go on around the world, it's real lives. Our soldiers' lives are at stake and are dying for your inverted comma liberties. Even though there may be other agendas at play that set these wars off to begin with, which is something that's not tackled at all in this film. There's no kind of motivation behind this raid, apart from it's the bad guy Taliban guys, but we don't know what's going on in that region. There's nothing. There's no kind of. I don't know whether, in this sort of film they've got enough time or energy to kind of explain the geopolitics of the area.
I don't think that's the point of the movie.
No.
And I don't think you can lay that at every film that they need to. That every film needs to justify justify its context.
True, that's true.
There are other films which seek to do that, seek to question, the validity of a particular conflict or the way in which that war is being waged, and I think that's a different body of films.
Yeah, let's not forget that this film is based on a book by the actual only surviving party member that crawled out alive. We mentioned it earlier on. I've seen some interviews with him where he's obviously promoting the film but he's written a few books actually, and he is a dyed-in-the-wool frogman, as they say, and he's very, obviously, because he's been in it, I think it's affected him quite substantially, and he is, I suppose, it's very difficult for him to be impartial about what's going on. He's very pro-American, very pro the military, which you would understand being in his position and having had the injuries and the personal trauma that he's had because of various tours that he's done.
Well, just coming back to a point that I was making earlier, which was kind of what did we learn from this film? What was the point of this movie? And after watching this film again, I thought, well, this essentially, it's a tale of survival, isn't it? It's about this guy who, through his training, through his inner determination, is thrown into this horrific nightmare and somehow manages to come through the other side. And as interesting as that is to I think in Lone Survivor, it's only interesting because of the filmmaking. There isn't anything fundamentally interesting about his survival that is actually fundamentally interesting. And another film popped into my head, which I don't know if you've seen, which is that film called, I think it's called 127 Hours, about that guy who gets trapped.
Great film.
Gets trapped in a
crevasse, isn't it?
In a crevasse. Basically, he realizes no one is going to come to rescue him, and he then eventually realizes that the only way for him to escape is to cut off his arm. And so the film is about him coming to that decision, and then about all the steps that he needs to make in order to get through that particular decision. And so I guess that film is a more interesting tale of survival, because it sort of asks the question of you as the audience, how far are you willing, what are the lengths that you're willing to go to in order to survive in a particular given situation. And that character had choices that he could make as to whether he survived or not, whereas in this film, it is not dramatically that interesting.
Yeah, I think the action sequences are so realistic. I think some of the kind of the peripheral decision making and the thought process into people's motivations has been lost in this film, and it's very kind of military regimented. It's kind of what happened, this is how you got out of it. There's no kind of nuances here that we got in 127 hours. A little bit more of a humanity. There's almost like the humanity's been removed. The only bit of humanity we see, really, I suppose, comes from the fact that they let the three goat shepherds free, which kind of caused the problem, and the fact that it was rescued by one of the local villagers at the end who kind of braved everything to save the life of an American person, even though his own personal life would be at risk.
Yeah.
But when the guys are on patrol, and the way that it's all about being part of a team and bonding and kind of being this machine that works through. There isn't really time for sentiment or choices. You do what you have to do. So that I think maybe is part of why this isn't quite as interesting as 127 Hours.
Yeah, because that scene you mentioned with the goat herders, it really stands out in the film because it is the sort of one of the very few scenes in this movie where you think, oh, okay, something interesting is happening here, and there's characters facing a moral quandary, and it kind of deals with that in about 3 minutes, and it then gets back to mortars.
Yeah, I know it's hard, I mean, I think they've really tried to make an accurate. When you I suppose when you're dealing with a true story, you've got that pressure of honouring, not just, especially one that's involved death, honouring the people that have died, and you've got people who are alive who are going to watch it, and unless you really don't care, but if they're involved in the kind of creative process, you do have to watch what you do a little bit more than just sort of a fantasy story.
Mm. Well, let's talk about the lengthy action sequence, which is at the middle of this film. And when I first watched this film, it was this part of the film that really impressed me. I thought it was one of the best depictions of combat I've seen in a movie. I mean, it's tense, it's grueling. I mean, it's a very tough to watch. I mean, is that the sort of impact that it had on you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you get that feel of a continuous onslaught, that they're absolutely under a barrage of enemy fire, RPGs, all sorts of stuff, and they're pinned down. They can't really get out. They're getting shot to pieces. The camera work there, I think he decided to do it was a digital cinematography, so you do get that kind of almost handheld, like you're one of the party that's there. Going along for posterity that you're sort of viewing this. So and the stuntmen, there's some of the stunts in this.
Oh, we've got to salute the stuntmen on this movie.
Absolutely incredible. I don't think I've ever seen people like properly bouncing off rocks. Apparently, several were injured because they couldn't control some of the falls.
I'm not surprised.
There's some big hits that they take in it, and Stuntmen's Union, hats off to you, because this one, I don't remember one as brutal as this, and that's part of the realism of this film. You do really feel that you're in a gunfight, and it is an amazing watch, and it is the sort of saving grace of the film.
And I think what really heightens the action sequences is the editing, both of the camera work, but also the sound editing as well. Because you feel, I mean, the kind of the most, I guess, impactful, certainly for me, moment of those action sequences where the soldiers they're backed into a corner and they basically have to make this decision to essentially jump off the side of a mountain, and they tumble down it, and the way that particular sequence is cut, not just visually but also the sound of it, you hear every time they smash into some boulder or
break a bone
or break a bone or some tree that is on the way down. You really, the way that sequence is cut together, you just feel every single one of those blows.
Yeah, I mean, during the filming of this, apparently Peter Berg was going for realism throughout, and he says it was a mistake, but apparently Mark Wahlberg's one of the first times he's ever gone mental on set. One of the mortars actually went off near his face about 2 seconds before it was supposed to, and he's had problems apparently in the past with metal fragments in his eyes, so he's like massively sensitive to explosions and stuff, and it was a mistake apparently, but for this realism, obviously the mortars are very close to the actors. This one went off slightly earlier than it should have been, and he was very lucky apparently not to get injured.
Well, let's have a bit of a chat about the kind of the characterization in this film, because I think one of the criticisms that does come up in terms of the reviews of this movie is I guess the flimsiness of the characters in this movie. And I think it's definitely true. I think Mark Wahlberg as Marcus Luttrell, there's no real arc to his character. He's no different at the end of this film than he was at the start, despite all that he's gone through. And yeah, it does I think, especially now that I've watched this film a few times, it does hurt the repeat viewability of this movie, that you're just kind of waiting for the good action sequences in the middle of the film, and at either end of it, it's just thin gruel for you as a film viewer.
There's no background to the characters really. I mean, they've obviously, the idea is to sort of portray them as a band of brothers, and you get that, but there's been loads of films where you've had a band of brothers, but each character has unique personality, or one of them's a funny guy, or something to sort of differentiate. They're all a bit faceless, aren't they? It's not a huge amount to differentiate between the characters. There's no sort of backstory really to any of them, so you don't know what motivates them to do
Well, I mean, the film kind of tries that a little bit. I mean, it's sort of like you get one of them has a pregnant wife, one of them is about to get married, but that is literally
it's
apart from those solitary details, you learn nothing else about these characters, and so they just become, oh yeah, pregnant guy and wedding guy.
I mean, I guess maybe the thought process was, if you start doing cut shots of flashbacks to their time in the US or other, it will take you out of that very intense moment that they're in. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to concentrate on this kind of the tough journey that they've had to do. So maybe that was the reason. But I don't know.
I think there were some wasted opportunities though, because so for instance, in that first 20 minutes of the movie, they spend at least 5 minutes establishing this new guy who is being
yeah.
inducted into the SEALs, and he just disappears. He plays absolutely no part in the rest of the film. So they had the time to mess around with with that character. That is time that could have been spent.
That was actually some of the best bits. You thought that, but they just trying to bring out the characters of the individuals and the hazing and stuff like that.
Because I was waiting for him, because the sort of the natural thing is you think, oh yeah, he's then going to be on the mission, and this is going to be
jump out of the helicopter and save him or something like that.
Yeah, and you're waiting for him to come back into the movie, and he never comes back. It's a complete red herring.
Apparently, this film they shot about 2.5 hours worth of stuff, so they've really edited it down.
Okay.
Like another one of these things where we pick through the bones of a film and try and work out what film it might have been in the beginning.
Well, if you read reviews of this movie, one of the things that comes out in some of the more critical reviews is various writers, attributing a certain kind of pro-military syrup, a certain jingoistic propaganda message behind this particular film. I mean, is that something that you saw in this movie? I mean, to be honest, it's kind of there, but I don't think it's really. It just feels like dressing round the sides. It doesn't really feel that is the central thematic core of this movie. So I kind of get that criticism, but equally, I'm actually not sure that it's wholly valid.
I've seen worse, let's put it like that. I've seen, I can't remember, but there's one film which had the American flag sort of fluttering in the breeze as the last shot. Yeah, it didn't have that sort of, ridiculous kind of schmaltz. But
it does have like video footage of all of the people who were killed in this particular mission being shown as a very lachrymose cover version of David Bowie's Heroes plays out.
Yeah, that's bad. The music choice is bad. The showing the real, the biggest impact. Like I've seen a lot of these films and I do like them where it's a real story then fictionalized for cinema. And, the actors play the parts. And then at the end of the film, you see the real characters and you see what they're doing now. And that kind of brings it home about the reality of the story. And so that is almost the most powerful bit, can be the most powerful bit of a film. And it's just how you deal with that. So, yes, that is a good thing that he put those in, and the photos of the people that died and the real soldiers involved. But then your choice of Heroes by David Bowie, a cover version, that's the schmaltzy element that I think that is a bit of a misstep for me. Fair enough.
Well, Mark Wahlberg is the star of this particular movie, and Dara and I we've along with being both being movie fans, we're both music fans. So as part of this review, we've taken a look back at Mark Wahlberg's music career. So for those of you who don't know, in the early 90s, Wahlberg headed up Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, who released 2 hip-hop flavoured albums in the early 90s. And Dara, you went back and investigated some of those songs. What did you make of Wahlberg's music career?
Yeah, I went down a right royal YouTube rabbit hole the other day, and it's amazing the things that you can find out about people, old interviews and what have you. So, like a number of things. I'll stick with the music. Start with the music, and then we can talk about a few other bits and pieces. So, Marky Mark, I think it's fair to say he's a working class guy. Boston kind of Irish American background. Was in a gang, so you could have had some street credentials, when he was in his teens. Some of his raps aren't actually that bad. I'm quite a big rap fan myself. I listen to a lot of different stuff from over the years, and one or two of it. There was one track of his in a sort of Eric B. and Rakim flow, which I thought was quite good. But I went a bit further into his career, because after I think his rap career didn't actually end so well. And then he was picked up by, ended up doing a collaboration with a European reggae musician, Prince Ital Joe, and had a number 1 in Germany, unbelievably, with his song United.
Everyone's had a number 1 in Germany, Dara.
United. He had, along with Hasselhoff, Yeah, he it's kind of a mix of sort of gospel-influenced Euro dance with a bit of slash of Mr. Vane involved. Any fans of Culture Beat out in the house? Which, amazingly went to #1. So you got to give this guy credit. You know, he's like a cockroach. You know, any bad things he does, he just keeps on coming back, and he's successful in so many ways, and he's very motivated. You know. Like a lot of people, what is the guy from Culture Beat doing now? Probably stacking shelves in Tesco. But Mark Wahlberg sod that. My music career is not going well. I'm going to be an actor. And look at him now, highest paid earner in Hollywood.
That is indeed. Now, when you were looking at, going down this YouTube rabbit hole, Dara, I presume you must have watched some of the videos to some of his old songs, and were you struck by the fact that most of his videos feature him bare-chested, covered in baby oil, going a lot?
Yeah, a lot. He liked a baseball cap, liked a basketball vest. I actually watched a really interesting interview on The Word. So do you remember Danny Bear? So your non-UK visitors might not know Danny Bear. She was a model stroke television presenter on a early 90s cult music and current affairs sort of show.
I wouldn't call the word current affairs.
Okay, but what
sort of music and culture. That's about as far as you can go with that.
Music and culture, which was absolutely amazing. I used to watch it religiously, and I think a lot of people my age used to watch it. Had a different guest presenters on there, and he's on there being interviewed by Danny Bear, and so he's very young at this point. I think he must be like 19, 20, and he's just signed a deal with Calvin Klein to model their underwear. So that is why you see him constantly shirtless in his pants, because he's kind of cross-pollinating his brand. So the guy from an early age is, very business savvy. He knows how to sort of work the business. And it's quite funny watching him on The Word talking about all the women he's had sex with at that age. Danny Bear goes, why is it like the same question? Why is it we always have to see you in your pants? He goes, it's difficult for someone who has, sex with so many women to have to do this, but it's the crowd sort of had a mixed reception to him. Let's put it like that.
Okay. Well, you liked his gospel-influenced Eurodance music. I, for myself, when I went down the Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch rabbit hole, I listened to quite a lot of his tracks. The one that stood out for me, probably that I would suggest is worth a bit of a dip into, is On a House Tip. So I mean, Dara, as a survivor of the early 90s, I don't know if you remember that house music and hip hop had a kind of brief shotgun marriage, and the kind of like hip house, the sort of the sort of hip house movement. So he did. So Marky Mark kind of obviously he was essentially rap hip hop. He kind of decided to sort of dip his toe into the hip house movement. Recorded On a House Tip, and so this song. It kind of, much like some of Marky Mark's better songs, it basically takes some solid gold samples, which you just can't complain about, and then sticks Marky Mark over the top of it. So this song,
what one's this got?
It's got a kind of old, it's got a house track called "Move Your Body" by Marshall Jefferson.
Yes, no.
It's got a drum loop from Lynn Collins' "Think," which used on a million tracks.
We all know that one, yeah.
And it's got a little sample from Jungle Brothers' "I'll House You."
Okay.
And I mean, those are all great songs, and if you chop up little bits of them, put them together, it's very hard to rearrange them in a way that doesn't sound awful. And that was probably of all the tracks that I went back and listened to, that was the one that stood out for me.
Did you not like Wild Side?
I did, but I kind of feel everyone's rapped over that loping Lou Reed beat by now.
Dum 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 dum. Actually, we could just put that. You could put that sample through this whole podcast.
I'm probably going to have to pay like a royalty now to Lou Reed's estate now, because you've hummed too many seconds of that.
No, what I've done is I changed it by a semitone different, so it's actually not the same. So it's fine. We can do that.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be looking at the exploding helicopter action. So get ready to hit the skip button now.
On the Simplistic Reviews podcast, we talk movies. We talk TV. We talk.
Hello, Julie, what the heck are you doing?
Trying to make our spots sound more exciting by adding explosions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have got the point across with sound effects, not the real thing.
Download the show on iTunes or at simplisticreviews.blogspot.com.
I'm sure your insurance company will cover that.
No, they won't.
No, they probably won't.
We're back, and now we're looking at the exploding helicopter action. Our favourite casualty of war occurs when a big Boeing CH-64 Chinook helicopter is scrambled for a rescue mission. It flies out to a mountain where Wahlberg and his team are trapped by the Taliban, but before reinforcements can be dropped off, one of the Afghans fires an RPG. The missile flies straight inside the back of the whirlybird via the open loading ramp. Soldiers dodge out of the way as the rocket flies down the centre of the cargo hold. Hitting the cockpit, it kabooms and completely severs the front of the chopper. The dismembered helicopter falls to the ground and explodes. Dara, what did you make of this exploding helicopter?
I really like this. Really, really good one, this one. In keeping with the action in this film, which is excellent. I like the fact we don't often see one of these Chinooks get downed. That's unusual. It looked really realistic. Obviously, they can't have actually blown one of these things up. But what I really liked is like the Chinook is such a big helicopter. I've never seen it where the actual looks like the head, the front bit, the cockpit of the helicopter splits away, blows it up away, still intact, but away from the rest of the fuselage, like a fly's head being taken off a fly's body, and that kind of falls down in a separate fiery explosion. Beautiful. I really liked it. I think it was the way that I think we've had it before, where we've had a rocket go through the interior of a helicopter, but because they're so small, most of them, it kind of does, it's 2 seconds and it hits the back. But this one sort of goes a bit longer. You see the whole it all tumbles down the hillside. Really fantastic. Really thought this was a grade explosion.
Well, you're right. We do get to see several unique things here because I think this is the only Chinook helicopter that I've yet logged in the Exploding Helicopter project.
Oh, wow.
I went back through the records and I couldn't find another film with an exploding Chinook helicopter in it. I mean, I may have I've got over 350 films now on my radar with exploding helicopters in. My ailing memory is not what it used to be, so I may have missed one, but yeah, I went back through the records. I couldn't find another Chinook helicopter that's exploded, which is very bizarre because they're pretty standard military type of helicopter. There must be some other films out there that have blown these up, but Lone Survivor definitely is in a small minority of movies that has exploited the explosive capabilities of that particular helicopter. And as you say, we get to see the missile traveling for a short time inside the helicopter itself. That is very different from most of them. Normally it's just an impact on the side, and as you say, the way in which the front of that helicopter falls off is another exemplary unique touch.
Yeah, I think maybe we don't see it because these helicopters are much harder to maneuver and they're probably a lot more expensive to get your mitts on. I'm not sure you can just rent one out. So that might be the reason why, and they're sort of striving to make this as realistic as possible. It wouldn't have been acceptable just to pitch up in some little helicopter that you change the livery on. So that's maybe why we're seeing it for the first time. But yeah, very exciting. This was a unexpectedly good one.
You also get to see one of my favourite exploding helicopter tropes, which is pilots despairingly at the controls of their stricken whirlybird. So you get to see, there's a few shots of that, always like to see that. And there's also another action movie trope where Eric Bana gets to yell RPG, which is a kind of classic trope of any action movie. Always love it. I'd love someone to pop up in the high street with an RPG so I can just sort of shout that at passers-by.
I'd like to see you in a war situation, Will. I'd like to see what would that be the making of you?
I don't know. If
it could go either way.
If watching Lone Survivor convinced me of one thing, it is that I never want to be in a conflict. I really.
You'll be the Eric Bana character, barking out orders from his ivory tower. That's where you would be.
And then being killed after making an ineffective contribution to the war effort.
A bad decision, and you're punished for it.
But before we finish up on this section, we should probably also give a shout out to the director of this movie, because both you and I are very positive about the exploding helicopter that we've seen in this movie. And Peter Berg has one of the, also on his CV, is one of the greatest exploding helicopter movies of all time, because he directed the board game adaptation Battleship, which features a record-breaking 8 exploding helicopters, the most that have ever been put on screen in one single film. So, Peter Berg, he is a man that we need to salute.
I never understood how they could make a 2-hour film about people putting plastic pegs in holes. How did they get the green light for that?
I don't know, and after watching the film, I don't know either.
I might be getting it confused with something else. So we salute him. He's obviously a fan of the exploding helicopter, and for that alone, we should doff our caps.
Okay, I think our mission on this podcast is complete. Dara, as we're reviewing Lone Survivor, I don't think it's right for both of us to make it to the end of this show. So how do you want to go out? Do you want to step on a landmine? Sniper's bullet to the head? Or...
hamburger on a toilet. Thank you.
I was hoping that you'd choose to sort of slowly bleed out from a shrapnel wound.
Honestly, I think I've got tuberculosis right now, so I'll be dead soon. Don't worry about it.
On that reassuring note, I think we're going to end things. We probably don't say this enough on Exploding Helicopter, but thanks for listening. We know that you don't have to, and we know you're only with us until you find a better podcast. But while you're with us,
there is no better podcast. This is the best podcast. What are you talking about?
You really aren't. You really don't listen.
This is the only podcast that exists. There's only like 2 podcasts on the internet, and we're one of them, aren't we? Will, hello.
You keep thinking that, Dara. I don't want you guesting on anywhere else. So keep thinking that. Well, you know what? I think we're going to be back soon. But until then, keep watching the skies for those exploding helicopters.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
I'm a hard-bodied, hairy-chested, rootin', tootin', shootin', parachutin', demolition, double-cap, crimpin' frogman. There ain't nothing I can't do, no sky too high, no sea too rough, no muff too tough. Learned a lot of lessons in my life. Never shoot a large caliber man with a small caliber bullet. Drive all kinds of trucks. 2x, 4x, 6x. Those big that bend and go when you step on the brakes. Anything in life worth doing is worth overdoing. Moderation's for cowards. I'm a lover, I'm a fighter. I'm a UDT Navy SEAL diver. I'll wine, dine, intertwine, then sneak out the back door when the refueling is done. So if you're feeling froggy, then you better jump, because this frogman's been there, done that, and is going back for more. Cheers, boys.